Hi, this is Matt Regier with my presentation on Publix at Remington USD 206. So here's the overall view of my graphic, and I'll say just before I start that I found this assignment a little bit challenging to organize. I really struggled with how to organize this information and then how much information to put into each box so that it was complete but not too cluttered. So this was my best attempt, but I'll certainly try to supplement this with some verbal explanations as well. I'll start with the internal Publix on the right side here, and I tried to build this from the bottom up in many ways. So I'll start with our school board, which is certainly an internal public and communicates in a variety of ways, but mostly in two ways. There's frequent informal conversations with parents and patrons. This is something that in a small community such as ours happens pretty often. Many of these school board members' phone numbers are readily available. They have many friends in the community. They're friends with parents and other patrons. So this is a frequent channel of communication for them, and it's generally informal. It might be a phone call with an agenda, but it's still an informal conversation. It's not a meeting that's been set up, and it's not at a board meeting. There are also monthly board meetings that are available, and occasional appearances by these school board members in more of an official capacity. There's an open forum at the monthly board meetings. Those minutes are posted online. But that really is the way that our school board communicates with us. They are not the ones that communicate with teachers, at least, on a most frequent basis. Next up is our superintendent, who communicates at least weekly with the principals certainly through email and phone calls, but also with a weekly staff meeting. There's consistent communication back and forth with board members. That's certainly a two-way street. And then our superintendent's pretty diligent about making weekly visits and sending at least a monthly email or letter to update teachers on staff, whether that's on initiatives or just a happy Thanksgiving, Merry Christmas type of email. But there is some communication back and forth with teachers and staff, less on the official business side most of the time and more just on the public relations side. Next up the chain is the administrative staff, which is certainly more in the daily grind with teachers and school staff. There's daily communication with teachers and staff verbally. There's daily communication via email. There's also weekly communication then with the superintendent and school board. Each of our principals send out a weekly bulletin, and then there's some other weekly tasks that they're asked to do. There's also a weekly social media post, at least, with the schedule for the week and some updates, things to look for the community. There's positive recognition posts that are made via social media for the broader community via Twitter and Facebook. And then there's also a monthly informative communication for parents. Sometimes this is about conferences. Sometimes this is about a new initiative at the school. Sometimes this might be about a construction project or a change or maybe a meeting that's coming up for, say, FAFSA completion or something like that. But that's at least a monthly communication from the principals to the parents to inform them of something that's coming down the pipe that maybe their students haven't brought home, or that we just want to support the information that students are bringing home to their parents. Next up is teachers. Again, there's daily verbal and email communication with administrators and staff. We have a relatively small staff, so we all see our principal every day. We all see each other every day, and I think that's a healthy thing. It allows for simple, easy, quick verbal communication. We don't typically have to send an email if verbal communication is preferred, and that I think is a strength of our district, and I'll get to those later. There's also daily classroom posts or emails to supplement instruction to students. There's frequent communication, obviously verbally with students, but also in some form of online or print or digital medium, communicating with students to supplement instruction that goes on in the class. And then depending on the teacher and depending on the student, there's weekly to monthly communication with parents. That sometimes is via email, sometimes via phone calls, sometimes conferences, but at least monthly communication with parents, whether that's a notification of an upcoming test or a positive note about a student, or sometimes it's about a student maybe needing to improve a grade, but a variety of reasons for weekly to monthly communication with parents in the mode of communication that they find simplest for them. School staff, again, daily talks with teachers and administration. I included our custodians, our secretary, our counselor in here, anyone that was not a teacher or administrator in the building. So this would also include paras. A variety of people fit under this umbrella. But again, there's daily talks. There's frequent Google chats and emails that go on with this group. We have a Google chat system that we use to track some absences or students that might be roaming the hallways. Our secretary speaks with our parents and our students daily. Not every parent or every student, of course, but there's also times when I'm in the room and can't imagine how she gets any work done because her phone keeps ringing. So she is consistently on the phone with parents and students about absences or about questions, events, things like that. And then our counselor shares a weekly newsletter with college and career information for our parents and students. And that includes a variety of information. It is, for the most part, a one-way street, but our counselor is sharing that out consistently. Our students, again, frequent informal talks with teachers and staff. And this just isn't just chatting about the weather outside or classwork necessarily. It's fairly common for our students to have an informal talk about how our school is going. Maybe that's whether they like the schedule or not, or how they're using their flex time, or college visits, or a potential job shadow. That's a frequent topic of conversation for our students. We've built in an advisory time within our schedule that allows for those informal talks. We have mentors set up between teachers and school staff and students so that those informal talks have some time set aside for those talks to occur. So this does say informal talks, but that is definitely a two-way street, and that's definitely an intentional period, even though it's an informal period. There's also biannual surveys about our school redesign project. We survey our students and ask how they feel like they're using their time, whether they're being successful in school, whether they enjoy school, whether they feel safe at school, and then whether they feel supported and prepared. And then finally, our parents, I put at the top of this chain as far as our internal publics. I really feel like they are kind of on the other end of the spectrum, maybe from the school board, or maybe it goes full circle, I don't know. But our parents, informal conversations with staff and teachers at events. This is a very common thing in our small community. Just the other day, I had a set of parents stop me at a football game and ask about their daughter's physics grade and how they thought they could support her better, or if there was anything that I could do. That's a great way for me to have those conversations and for our parents to have those conversations. And it's certainly more comfortable and easy and simple than maybe a more elaborate structure. They also get the biannual surveys about school redesign for their children. And then there are also frequent communication between our parents and our school staff, specifically our counselor, but teachers as well, about absences, events, and other questions. So some strengths and weaknesses, or strengths and areas for improvement. I thought that was probably a better term for this. For our internal publics, our verbal communication is really, really strong. I've always felt that that's one of the strengths of our school. Our size helps with that, but there's consistent verbal communication. It's effective, and I feel like most of our staff and our teachers and our administrators are comfortable and honest and open in that verbal communication, so it can be effective. I also feel that we have parent relationships and a comfort level that are very solid and on strong footing. So in general, our parents feel comfortable coming up to us and talking at a ball game or at a concert, or just out in the community at large. And I think that's a healthy thing for our school. It's certainly something that has led to generally positive relations. Our social media presence is a new strength. That's not something that we've been very good at in the past. We had limited our entire district to one Facebook page. But I would actually say in the last year or two, we've turned that from a weakness into a strength, so that our parents, students, and patrons have a little more access to information. They have another mode of two-way communication with the school. We've gotten multiple messages via Facebook or replies to tweets asking questions that have allowed for better two-way communication, at least with simple questions about events and things like that. And our school board and administrators are very available and receptive to patrons. I think that's a strength of our district. And again, it's probably relative to our size, but that's something that our patrons appreciate, is to have that access. And as long as it's handled appropriately by administrators and school boards, that's not only a strength, but also a net positive for the district. Some areas for improvement would be to increase opportunities for parent input into their child's education. That's always, I feel like, a parent issue, that they want more input, or they desire more input, or they at least want to know. So creating more of a two-way street for parents. We do survey them. I think some opportunities for parents to sit down and just have a roundtable discussion with an administrator or with a teacher would be healthy. I'll also talk about that with some of the external publics on the other side, but more opportunities for parents to ask some questions or to have some input about what's going on in the schools, I think would be healthy. Along that line, some consistency for parent and teacher communication, whether that's one mode of communication or probably just a more frequent or a more consistent frequency of that communication would be another positive step for our district. And then improving communication between buildings. I didn't really mention that above because it didn't seem to fit, but our high school, middle school, and elementary school are in 3 different buildings. They're also in 3 different towns. And while we're a very small community, there's not a lot of overlap between the 3 buildings. So that's a challenge and something that I think we could certainly improve within our district. Our external publics, I didn't feel like I organized quite as well, so this is not quite as consistent or linear as the internal publics. So I started with churches at the top. They're a major part of our community. I believe our community, which has 150 students in our high school, has 13 to 15 churches. So this is it's a strong church-based community. There's a lot of church presence. There is certainly some infrequent event-based communication. We offer our facilities for a community Bible school in the summer. There's other events that make use of our facilities. We've used church facilities for practices before. So there's some infrequent event-based communication there. And then our churches are a pretty major part of our system for supports for children in need. If we have a child that needs a bed or a coat or something like that, our churches consistently are able to step up and provide that. Our colleges, we actually have relationships with 2 different community colleges. Butler Community College offers multiple online and in-person courses to our students, and Hutchinson Community College offers a vocational tech program that we utilize. For both of those, we communicate pretty closely with the registrars and also with some advisors that help us to keep tabs on the students. That includes the professors. It is a college course, so the tracking is very different than a high school course, but we have good relationships with them and pretty consistent two-way communication. We also require multiple college visits for seniors and a variety of presentations at the school from different colleges. Those are mostly one-way presentations where our students are getting information, gaining information from those colleges. Our local businesses, there is certainly some codependence with event-based communication. They advertise in our facilities and we can advertise in theirs for events, and that's helpful, but it's very limited. And then there are some fairly infrequent in our area job shadow requests and infrequent internships. We have one student that's interning at a local mechanics shop, but for the most part, I would say we either underutilize or don't utilize at all our local businesses, and that's an area for improvement that I'll mention later. Our recreation department is one of our larger external publics. There's certainly some collaboration for facilities, for clinics, practices, and games. They use our facilities for basketball practices for the youth. We actually use their baseball field during the summer, so there's consistent communication on scheduling, even some collaboration on painting the fields and caretaking and things like that. And that's been a very healthy relationship over the years. As our athletic director, I get to have a firsthand in that, and that's been helpful for me as I've learned how to communicate more effectively with a wider variety of stakeholders. Certainly people that aren't involved in a school have different schedules, and so finding ways to work around that, to be respectful of that, but also to make our needs known. That's been a learning experience for me, but a good one. There's also school communication channels that are used for the recreation department, so they advertise their biddy ball and their t-ball and baseball in the summer through the school channels. So they send those notes home with students through the school. Students bring them back to school, and then it gets passed down to the park board. Again, that's been a codependent and also a positive relationship. And then finally, voters. This is a large umbrella statement, but in our district, we have a private school and a healthy homeschool contingent. So there are several constituents and patrons that are not patrons of USD 206 necessarily, or aren't sending their students there. So we send out a monthly community report in print. That is obviously a one-way communication forum. There's an open forum at monthly school board meetings, which is also one way, but only from the voters to the school board. There's no response from the school board at those events. And then there's social media messaging, which has allowed some of those voters to have a little bit more of a voice one way or the other. I would say in general, our patrons that are not sending students to USD 206 are among the quieter portions, unless we're trying to pass a bond issue or something like that. But I think respecting and seeking out their voice is still important, and I'll mention that down below. Some strengths here with our external publics, our college offerings and communication are excellent. I feel that we've kind of found a sweet spot for how many courses to offer and how to help track our students, and some ways to make that a good experience for our students, but not one where we just ask them to sink or swim. So that's been a positive area for our school. And then our monthly community report, while it's fairly simple, it's a few sheets of paper that are stapled together and mailed to everybody in the district. It is a way that we are able to communicate with the wide variety of stakeholders that we have in our district. So that's something that I think is a positive and a strength. And there's a variety of communications in there, from the lunch menu to positive school happenings, to maybe a letter from the superintendent about whether that's been COVID policy in the last few years, or a bond issue, or the school redesign. All of those things have been communicated to the broader community through that. And it's available to everyone in the same format, which I think is healthy and a good way for us to communicate that out. And then finally, some areas for improvement for our district with external publics. There are very few opportunities for business or voter input, and I think that's something we could improve. That might look like some community surveys. It might look like informal communication opportunities outside of school events, whether that was coffee with the principal or coffee with a teacher at a church. Maybe it's just at the cafe downtown, and then the superintendent advertises and then meets for coffee with whoever shows up on a Tuesday morning or a Saturday morning. I think those would be healthy opportunities, even if they were not very well attended, for our voters and our constituents and our patrons to know that we are reaching out and looking for their input. I always think that is a healthy way for schools to to seek out input, and then hopefully to glean something from those business leaders or from those patrons that may not have students in the schools, but know what they're looking for in an employee, or know what they're looking for in an adult citizen in our community. And then some outreach to district patrons, again, without students or with students in other schools. Some intentional outreach to those that are paying taxes for our schools, but that are not benefiting directly from that. I think some direct outreach to them would also be healthy. Overall, I feel like, as you can probably see here, that our internal publics are at this point more successful than our external publics. I certainly listed more strengths for the internals and more areas for improvement for the externals. But this was certainly a healthy exercise for me in considering each of these, and then in considering some ways that USD 206 can improve our communication. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed it.